Okay, let me share my screen. I hope you can all see this. Is that visible to all of you now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well,
Oh,
thank
Barry,
you.
may I ask you whether you would like people to ask questions during your presentation or at pauses at your choice times?
I welcome you to question me at any time, stop me at any time. If you have any questions whatsoever, I'll be glad to try to answer them, whether it's about photography, flying, aerial photography, whatever you may feel inclined to question, please go right ahead during
Thank
the
you.
presentation and stop me. So you can unclick your mute button and talk directly to me. I want to
Thank
thank all of you for attending tonight, and especially thank Lorinda for inviting me to give this presentation. I'll try to keep you entertained. I'll go on for about 45 minutes, and I plan to present images from 3 books of mine that have been published over the years. They're pretty representative of the type of work I do. Uh, I've been a photographer, like Lorinda said, for decades, specializing in aerial photography. And I like to say I've never had a real job. I've always been a freelance commercial photographer. So we'll start with my most recent book, not all that recent, 2013. I was one of a number of photographers who had been hired to document the construction of the new east span of the Bay Bridge. Um, by the time I was hired in 2009, the causeway leading up to the tower section had already been completed. And so I was uh, hired just to document this section of the bridge, along with 5 other photographers. Uh, the other photographers spent their time on the bridge or underneath it, for that matter. I was the specialist who was flying over the bridge during the construction phase. I had been hired by the Bay Area Toll Authority, which is a sub agency within the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which regulates all the mass transit, public transit systems throughout the 9 county Bay Area, including the bridges, the buses, the trains, BART, et cetera. Some of you may know or remember that large sections, the metal sections that comprise the roadbed and the actual tower, were not manufactured here. They were made in Taiwan and shipped aboard a ship across the Pacific Ocean on this ship called the Genoa. And here you see it approaching the Golden Gate Bridge. There's a web site where you can track ship traffic all around the world. I was able to monitor the ship as it left the port in Shanghai, came across the ocean. And when it approached the Bay Area, I would hop in my little airplane, fly out about 5 miles out around the Farallon Islands and pick it up and follow it in underneath the Golden Gate, underneath the Bay Bridge, and into its berth at Pier 1. And here you see the same ship passing underneath the Bay Bridge. On the deck of the ship, you can see these objects. Can you see my cursor when I circle it around?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So these large rectangles are referred to by the engineers as orthotropic box girders or OBGs. There are 2 of them on deck, and those are the actual roadbed that comprise the bridge. These square objects here at the bow of the ship are cross beams they hold the two roadbeds together. This crane was called the Left Coast Lifter. It was also manufactured in Shanghai, shipped over here on that same ship, the Genoa. What was interesting and quite surprising is when they unloaded it off the ship, they flooded the holds of the Genoa. The Genoa sunk down below the surface of the water, and the left coast lifter just kind of floated off the deck of the ship. Here you can
Wow.
see it lifting one of the OBGs off the Genoa, which is just out of the picture below the OBG. It's preparing to place it gently on this barge. Neither the barge nor the left coast lifter had their own uh, motorization, so they had to be uh, moved into place and held into position by the tugboats. Here you see the construction site. The left coast lifter has been moved from Pier 1, which is actually right here up at the very top of the photo. It goes underneath the bridge over here and then comes around and is held in this position. It's just loaded an OBG onto this track. This is the third OBG on this particular track. You can see 1, 2 here. This is the eventual eastbound direction of the traffic. And so this OBG is referred to as OBG 3 East. Anything on this track is OBG West. This track is called the false work because its only job is to hold the OBGs until they are suspended by the tower. At that point, they will be the false work will be removed. The gap in this western section of the track allows the left coast lifter to move in close enough to lower the OBG in place. Here are 4 sections of the tower. The tower was comprised of 4 legs. Each leg is comprised of 4 sections, brought again on the Genoa. Here you can see large sections of the roadbed are in place. This crane is starting to construct the superstructure around which the tower will rise. Um, you also see a shadow of my airplane on the clouds below and a rainbow around it. That's referred to as the pilot's glory. It's a rather rare thing for a pilot to see and even more rare to be photographed. And in this case, there's actually a double rainbow around my airplane.
I like to say I see it an awful lot of times flying in on commercial flights.
You do? Well,
I
that's,
do.
that's very interesting. Here you can see the roadbed is pretty completed. There's this reddish superstructure surrounding sections of the tower. Up at the very top of the structure is a small building. There's a winch there that lifts through a cable the tower legs, and then they're put into position. This large crane was used to construct the superstructure, and it'll be used to deconstruct it when the tower is in place. The roadbed is about 150 feet above the surface of the water. The top of the tower ends up being about 525 feet above the surface of the water.
Pardon, Barry, may I ask what kind of camera you have and how it is mounted? Is it handheld or is it in a housing attached to the plane? How do you aim it and trigger it?
Uh, I use a 35 millimeter camera. Um,
Uh-huh.
I've used a variety of different manufacturers over the years. I used to also have a a 6x7 camera that I did black and white work with, and I'll show you some of my black and white original work later on in the discussion. I've always handheld the camera. Um, I open the window of the airplane. Um, the, I unhinge the hinge that holds the window halfway open at about a 45-degree, and the strong wind as I'm flying along at 80 or 100 miles an hour in my little airplane. That strong wind holds the window open all the way up against the bottom of the wing. So I maneuver the airplane around. I often or usually fly in circles around whatever it is I'm trying to photograph. And so I maneuver the plane into position but with the correct bank angle and try to position my viewfinder so that I don't get uh, any wheels or wing struts or wings or tails or whatever in the view. Um,
So you're just looking at your view screen. You're not looking through the viewfinder.
well, no, I am looking through the viewfinder.
Oh my.
Yeah, not
So,
at
and
the
flying the plane at the same time.
correct.
Wow.
Well, it's not something I recommend. Um, I had been flying for at least 10 years with my commercial and instrument rating. Not I didn't fly commercially. I just flew privately for at least 10 years before I started taking up aerial photography. And it's not something that most pilots are capable of. Again, it's not something that I recommend. It's known in the pilot community as a good way to get into trouble if you do that. Somehow over the years, I managed to avoid getting into trouble. And as one of the attendees asked me earlier, it's muscle memory at this point. I spend a good 95% of my time flying the airplane and looking out the window, trying to figure out how to photograph what I want to photograph. When I see what I want to photograph, I pick up the camera, which is sitting in my lap. I take a few photographs, and then I put the camera back down. So I'm distracted from the actual flying for only a few seconds of a time of at a time. So it's not it doesn't take my attention away from the aircraft for very long. Still, at the same time, um, any pilot who's flown an aircraft for a long period of time gets to know how the airplane feels in different bank angles, whether it's climbing or descending, whether it's going fast or slowing down. You can get a sense of what the aircraft is doing. You can feel what it's doing. And so even when I sometimes linger a little bit longer than normal, I can tell what the airplane is doing without actually having to monitor the instruments or, look out the window to see what it's doing. Does that
Thank you.
answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Sure. I hear the typical morning fog. I'm looking towards the east at sunrise. You can see the sun reflecting off the morning water. The fog is butting up against the East Bay Hills. You can see the tower is almost completed. This was a milestone in the construction of the bridge and the tower. It's called the saddle lift. It's the uppermost structural piece of the tower. There's one more piece that goes on top of this, which I'll show you a little later, but it's not structural. This is called the saddle because the cables that string over the top of the tower lie on these curved surfaces. Being a milestone, it was an opportunity for VIPs and engineers to monitor the process. These are called catwalks. There's four of them, one under each section of the bridge, each section of the cable, I should say. And they were used by the engineers to monitor the progress of the stringing of the cable. You can see three of the four catwalks here strung up to the top of the bridge. The fourth just out of the picture behind the bridge. You can see the left coast lifter picking an OBG up and just about ready to place it into this gap.
Beautiful. I love the
Typical
compression
morning
with a distant
commute.
shore.
I'm sorry.
I love the compression with a distant shore.
Oh, yeah. I would use a variety of lenses. For you photographers, I would often move way back over where the toll plaza was and use a long telephoto lens to get this kind of view. Sometimes I'd get, as you saw earlier, I'd get right up on top of it with a shorter focal length lens.
Wow.
Uh, FAA requires separation of a minimum of 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within a 2,000 foot radius. So I assure you, I'm following FAA rules at all times. Now, this is a morning commute. I had no control, obviously, over the construction of the bridge or when things would happen. What I did have was the telephone number of the principal engineer on the bridge, Brian Peterson, who worked for American Bridge Flour. And he would call me or I would call him and he would tell me that something was going to happen at 6 o'clock the next morning or whatever. And so I'd be out there flying in circles uh, that next morning, uh, waiting to document whatever was going to happen that day. Sometimes I would shoot all day into the evening. My airplane um, only had roughly a 4 hour fuel supply. So when it would get close to that supply, I would go back to Oakland Airport, where I flew out of, gas up, maybe rest for a few minutes, and then go back to the bridge, and sometimes photograph throughout the evening. Here's a shot that was taken early in the morning before sunrise. The left coast lifter is about ready to close the gap with this OBG right here.
Was it easy to fit in? I mean, the last one, it's got to be tough, like the
You
last
can, you can see the
section of
clearance
rail
right
on the
here.
railroad.
You can see the clearance right here. It wasn't, I would say it's less than a foot. Uh,
Uh-huh.
um,
Wow.
the when they would when the left coast lifter would pick up an OBG off of the barge, it would pick it up rather rapidly. It might take only an hour to pick up an OBG and move the left coast lifter into position. Then it would sometimes take 2 or 3 hours to lower it into position in a very narrow slot. Um, Monitored by engineers at multiple engineers at all four corners. There's a lot of uh, wind out by the bridge. The OBG would move with the wind because it was just hanging down on this rectangular object right here, attached to these four blocks that were bolted onto the top of the OBG. And so that whole thing, as you can see, there's just a number of cables that are holding that rectangular piece, and so it could sway with the wind. So it was often a very long process.
Wow.
Closing that gap was another milestone, so it was an opportunity for VIPs to gather around and be photographed. What's also interesting about this image is that you can see the false work down here. which again will be removed later after the bridge has been finished. This is the crossbeam that holds the two roadbeds in place. This opening in the roadbed is where the cable is attached and cemented in a block that sits below the roadbed. There's another similar one over on this eastbound traffic of the roadbed. Here's a shot of the first cable, or yeah, I guess cable stringing right here. There were actually 100 and let me get this correct, 137 strands of cable that make up or comprise the main cable. Each of those strands is comprised of 127 individual strands of high tensile strength steel. The eventual cable will be compressed into 31 inches in diameter. And again, here's the opening in the deck of the bridge where this strand will be cemented into a block. The stringing of the cable continues all night long, and you can see the four catwalks clearly here lit up at night, and the stringing of the cable would continue long into the evening. Treasure Island, Angel Island.
Beautiful image.
Once, once the cable has been completed, a compression machine travels very slowly down the length of the cable and compresses it into that 31 inches. And every so often, a compression block is surrounded the cable to hold it into place. These suspension cables are attached to the compression block, and the suspension cables are attached to the outside of the roadbed right here. 200 of these compression blocks, 200 suspension cables. And here you can also see the almost finished pedestrian bicycle path on the southern side of the bridge. And here again, the catwalk is still in place. This was the first light test on a very small section of the bridge, with the Port of Oakland in the background. And this is that same section of the bridge a few minutes later. What was interesting here is that the lighting engineers thought I had manipulated this shot with Photoshop and exaggerated all this spillover light, but I assured them that it wasn't manipulated. In fact, for your information, I don't use Photoshop to manipulate any of my images. They're all natural images, or as natural as they can be. So I finally convinced them that it was unmanipulated, and they went back and refocused their lights to reduce the spillover.
Wow.
It was one of the more interesting interactions I had with some of the engineers.
Beautiful.
The tower is finished. Here's that uppermost non-structural decorative piece. The saddle lift that I showed you earlier is right here. All the weight of the bridge is on the cables, the main cables, the suspension cables attached to the roadbed. So all the weight has been transferred. This superstructure around the tower is no longer needed. So this large crane is demolishing the superstructure. Catwalks aren't needed anymore. You can see the workers standing on the main cable. They're attached with a safety wire, which is attached to a harness that they're wearing. No individuals were lost during the construction of this bridge. That
Fantastic.
red crane is what's used to demolish the catwalks.
Fantastic.
This was the first light test of the completed lighting along all along the bridge, plus these aviation safety red lights to warn off low-flying aircraft. These aviation lights flash on and off, and they're only on for a very short period, a fraction of a second. So, of course, my goal was to try and capture them as I flew by the bridge at 80 or
Wow.
100 miles an hour.
And you succeeded.
Yep.
Hey,
Wow.
Barry, I have a question.
Yes.
What is the bridge? What supports the bridge? I mean, what strata under the water is the bridge sunk into, and how deep does that support go?
Well, be, before any work began on either the tower section or the causeway section, they sunk these cement piers deep down into the bed of the bay. How far they go down, I don't know. I don't remember. Um, the tower itself is also anchored down into a cement pad that was constructed into the floor of the bed. Some of you may remember it was pretty controversial because after they built the tower and it was in place, they discovered there was some question about the integrity of some of the bolts that were used to hold the base of the tower in place. But the engineering firm did a study and determined that those bolts were sufficiently were sufficient enough to hold the tower, and the multiple backup systems were also sufficient should there be an earthquake and those bolts fail. So,
Excuse me, I just looked it up, and the bottom of the footing is 196 feet below the surface of the bay. And they say the thickness of the concrete footing box is 21 feet, and the bottom of the pile supported foundation box is minus 196 feet. So again, that's 196 feet down. So it's way down there, guys, because bay mud is lousy stuff to build anything on.
yeah, that's for sure. The tower is finished. The roadbed has been covered with a asphalt-like material to protect the surface of the bed. Golden Gate Bridge in the background.
Beautiful.
A night shot. This is Yerba Buena Island. This is a Coast Guard station here. And I show you this because at some point early on, the Coast Guard contacted me and asked me to stay in contact with them when I was flying around the bridge because the Coast Guard helicopters would often be in this area coordinating different maneuvers with Coast Guard ship just off the coastline here. I don't know what they were doing, but they were practicing various maneuvers. And so the Coast Guard wanted to know that I was there. I was already in contact with Coast Guard helicopters. There's a discrete frequency that I discovered by accident one day, not published in the aviation maps, that all of the Coast Guard, Highway Patrol, news, and tour helicopters and would communicate with, and they would make reporting points, or they would make reporting broadcasts to each other over this discrete frequency, and just telling each other where they were, what altitude, what they were doing, just so everyone knew where everyone was and minimize the potential for conflict.
By the way, I love the fact that you can see Sutro Tower so clearly in the distance.
Yeah, thank you. I'll show you another photo of that later. In fact, right here, huh? Uh,
Yep.
this photo was used on the cover of a book of about the construction of the bridge, published by a professor in the College of Environmental Design at Cal. And you can also see the Transamerica.
Yep.
The lane striping has been finished shortly before opening day, Labor Day 2013.
And the cranes are for media?
Um, I don't,
The mobile
there's,
cranes?
I don't know what those cranes are for. No one was in them.
Oh,
Um, I don't know.
maybe lights.
Maybe they were there just in case the media wanted to get up there. I'm not sure, but the media was tightly surrounding this area. Governor Gavin Newsom, not governor, Mayor Governor, Mayor Newsom was standing right there, surrounded by all his dignitaries. Now, I had been working with Kodak for a number of years. They bought a number of my photos. And in fact, at one point, they hired me to edit one of their publications titled Photography from Light Planes and Helicopters. That publication dealt primarily with topological survey. It didn't really deal with illustration photography. So at some point later on, in 1996, this book was published by Kodak, um, and it deals only with illustration photography. It hasn't says nothing about topological survey. That airplane is called a Citabria. It's not landing on the top of the bridge as you noted earlier with the long telephoto lens, you can compress distance. And so I'm about 1,000 feet laterally away from that Citabria for shortening the wheel span to make it look like it's landing on the bridge. And again, it's not manipulated, it's a real photograph. I have the slide that it was shot on to prove it. All the photos in the book illustrate something I'm talking about in the text. This is White Sands National Monument at sunset.
Oh,
White Sands is adjacent to White Sands Missile Test Range, and the Missile Test Range controls the airspace over White Sands National Monument. So before the age of the internet, it took letters and phone calls to get permission. I was assigned a particular day and time to shoot. I had no control over when and what time I could shoot. Not only that, I had to land at the local airport, pick up a monitor who sat in next to me in the airplane to make sure I didn't get too close to the missile test range and photograph any of its buildings. And this is what the weather was like that short time span that they gave me. Now,
well, you lucked out with that strike, didn't you?
if you've ever tried to photograph lightning, you know that the technique is to put your camera on a tripod, attach it to the ground, open up your shutter, and just wait until the lightning flashes. But I was pretty lucky that day. The lightning here was flashing very periodically. And so I could monitor that period and capture it as I released the shutter.
Wow.
This is another pilot's glory circling around the Golden Gate Bridge.
Wow. The subtlety is wonderful.
Thank you. Flock of sheep, Berryessa. Here I'm talking about how different types of motion affect your photography in the air. It's difficult enough to photograph anything that's stationary on the ground as you're flying by at 100 miles an hour. But if the subject is also moving, then you have to take that into account as well. Waves reflecting the setting sun in the northeast section of San Pablo Bay.
Wow.
Hmm.
Waves reflecting off a solar farm in the southeast corner of the Central Valley. Did I say waves?
Yeah, you said waves, you meant rays, I guess, light, sunlight.
I meant the sun.
Wow.
These are piles of almond, uh, big piles of almond. To give you a sense of scale, this is a tractor, and so is this. They're covered with plastic. Here's two of those piles that are uncovered.
Shadows are so interesting.
They're shaped like almonds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was down at a little farm called Berenda Mesa Farm, which is down in the southeast section of the Central Valley as well. So contrasting tractors east of Livermore. And this is a black and white original shot on a 6x7.
Wow. What year would this be, Barry, roughly?
Um, I would, I don't know exactly, but it was in the late 70s.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
This is the shoreline of Lake Berryessa. Those little white dots are just waves kicked up by a strong wind, and they're reflecting the sunlight.
Wow.
And you can see
Fabulous.
the muddy shoreline where it's very wet, and that's reflecting the sunlight as well.
Wow. Stunning.
Imported trucks in Benicia. I don't know why they bring them off the ship and put them in rows according to color.
And then they get loaded on trucks and trains.
Yeah, I guess two yellows and a red go here, and a black and a blue go there, maybe. This
You can
is
actually watch them load and unload the what they call ro-ros, roll on, roll off ships.
yeah,
In Richmond, there's a chain
yeah,
link fence you can just peer through and see the armies of drivers just
yeah.
going up in vans to get the vehicles and then getting
It,
them out of the ship or vice versa, getting them onto the ship. It's fascinating to watch.
yeah, it is really fascinating. I've seen it myself. This is a plot of earth on a hillside that's been graded. And so the earth is flat here, and then it drops off to a little cliff, and then it continues flat here until it drops off again. Each of these rectangular or squares is a housing plot. This is a cul-de-sac.
Ah, striking.
This is the famous mothball fleet in Suisun Bay, World War
It's
II
mostly
ship.
gone now.
They're gone now. Yeah, they sat there for decades. They eventually began to disintegrate and leak into the bay, and so they were disassembled and removed. But you can see on some of these the old gun turrets.
Yeah.
In the 90s, there was a group that produced a series of books called Day in the Life of, and I'm sure you remember. Uh, the group was run by a couple photojournalists, so they would bring in 40 or 50 photojournalists from around the country and document a particular city for one day and publish a book. I was involved with a similar group, although the difference was that uh, they brought in fine art photographers from all around the world, and we would document a place for a particular time period. The first project I worked on was Los Angeles. The book title was 24 Hours in the Life of Los Angeles. The second book I worked on was Ireland. Um, Ireland, A Week in the Life of a Nation. I rented an airplane there, flew around Ireland for a week or so. This was an amusement park in the middle of Ireland. In the middle of the amusement park is a little lake and this island where I guess they hauled up the boats at the end of the day that they rented out to customers.
Very cool.
Mount Adams in the foreground, Mount Hood in the background. I'm up at around 14,000 feet with oxygen and shooting through an open window and freezing my butt off.
And very close to Mount Adams.
Well, again, I'm not that close. I'm using medium range lens. I'm far enough away to avoid any turbulence that's created by the wind.
That's what I was wondering. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, these mountains, they can be very risky to fly too close to. I always give wide berth to any mountain range that I'm in the neighborhood of. I try to fly well above them and far laterally away from them.
May I ask what that ring is on in the distance? It looks like an artificial ring on the distant volcano. Do you see at the bottom, sort of towards the right? Yeah, keep going right. Right.
I don't
Left.
see a ring.
Um,
Am I near it?
keep going left. I'll tell you when to stop. Keep going.
You
Stay
don't
right
mean
there.
this. You don't
Yeah.
mean this.
Yeah.
Oh, um, I have no idea. I would just guess that it's what geologists refer to sometimes as an avalanche chute. It's an area where the earth gave way, maybe due to erosion, maybe a glacier was up here near the top, and when it collapsed, it carved out this circular shape. That would be just a guess that I would have.
Thank you.
Sure. Logging on the Columbia River separating Oregon and Washington. The logs are cut, tossed in the water, corralled with these long metal cables, and dragged with boats down for processing. The speckled highlights are again waves that are generated by a strong wind and they're reflecting the sun.
Beautiful sheen. Textures are wonderful.
Another one of those international books projects I worked on was Thailand, 7 days in the kingdom. This is a salt evaporation pond, or a series of them. It's actually a color photograph. It's similar to our salt evaporation ponds here in the Southeast Bay. Well, I guess they're in the South Bay and the Southwest Bay as well. What was interesting here is the sponsors of the group, unlike in Ireland, who were able to find an airplane for me, they couldn't find an airplane for me. But what they what they did do, much to my surprise, was to make arrangements with the Thai military,
Oh
Thai
my.
Air Force, and so I shepherded around the entire country flying on a military helicopter for a week. I basically had access to that helicopter for an entire week. It was a huge helicopter, one of those large ones, not a tiny little one that I used that I've flown in like a two-seater. It was like, I don't know, 10 or 12 passenger helicopter, double rotor, turbine. That thing must have cost $10,000 an hour.
Jeez. I
Just a
do
couple.
understand, though, that a lot of countries discourage civil aviation.
Yeah, well, there were other aircraft, a civil aircraft there. They just couldn't find someone who was willing to let me rent it for a week. But Be that as it may, it was quite interesting. Both pilots on the helicopter were very interesting. They had been trained in the U.S., and so I felt pretty comfortable flying with them. Another shot of a different section of the salt evaporation ponds, which are actually in the southern Gulf of Thailand. Here you can see the workers using these long wooden rakes, scraping up the salt into these circular piles. And in the South Bay here, of course, they use tractors to scrape up the salt.
Wow, it's so tiny.
This is a golf course in near Byron with a housing track adjacent to it. Has shadows on the track and the sand trap.
Fabulous.
This is a grove of citrus trees south of LA near a town called Paris, spelled Perris. The diagonal lines are a dirt road, and the more irregularly shaped lines are where a small river ran just after they planted the seedlings for the citrus grove and washed away the seedlings and created this abstract dendritic pattern, which is typical of water flowing down a slope.
Wow.
I'll show you more dendritic patterns later on. Grand Prismatic Spring in Yellowstone, Wyoming. I shot this in 1982.
You looked out without having too much steam over it.
Well, there you can't see the steam very well because I'm looking straight down at it. It does generate a lot more steam on occasion, but you can see it better when you're looking at it horizontally.
Of course. Wow.
This shot appeared on the cover of National Parks magazine shortly after that.
Beautiful.
I'm sure you've seen this kind of photo in various places since.
Oh, yeah. It's a popular item.
Red
Photograph.
Rock River in Montana. Rivers, when they start, they're usually fairly straight, but as they course through time, they ricochet off the banks on either side and erode those banks and start to meander off of the normal straight line of the river. And so you can generally get a sense of the age of a river by how much it meanders. Here you can see what's called an oxbow lake because it's cut off from the main course of the river because after time, the river, instead of going in this direction like this, it just decided to take a shortcut and go over there. And so this is earthen separating the oxbow lake from the river, the main course of the river.
Take a look at some of the geological maps of the Mississippi River. I mean, they're famous maps that were done in, I think, the 30s or so of the Mississippi River in, hundreds of miles length of it, showing the different geological strata and how the river just changes and changes and changes.
Yeah,
It's quite
they're
very,
not stationary objects.
no.
This is perhaps my most famous and well publicized image of the bridge in the city. It's been used just about every way you or I could imagine: posters, book covers, magazines, advertising, note cards, even on television. I like to interact with my clients when I have the opportunity. So I made a postcard of this and sent it out to my client list. And I posed a puzzle. I said, is this the north tower of the bridge or the south tower? And um, please defend your guess. Tell me how you can tell whether it's the north or the south tower. So I'd like to open it up to you. If you can tell me whether it's the north or south and how you know. Anyone who has a guess?
I have a guess, but I'll let someone else speak first.
No, you can guess.
Okay, I think it's the South Tower just because of the angle of the cables.
Uh-huh. It's
As
not.
Lindy, I think it's the South Tower too.
Why do you think, Lindy, why do you think it's the South Tower?
Its relationship to the pyramid.
Okay.
Um, I don't think you would have it so far to the left if it were the North Tower.
Well, you're both right, but your reasoning is incorrect, I'm sorry to say. If you go to that promontory on the Marin Headlands, you can get this exact same view of the North Tower. But the small clue, which only one of my clients would guess correctly, uh, because he was in fact a bridge engineer, is this small circular antenna. It's a microwave antenna, and it's only on the South Tower. It's not on the North Tower.
Oh, not too many people would know that. But what about the angle of the cables? I mean,
Well, you mean these cables or the
the suspension cables, the main suspension cables, they're steeper when they're going to the dead men in the cliff, and they're more shallow going towards the other support tower.
Yeah, I don't. That may be the case. I don't know, but I think it's pretty subtle. Um, it's not the clue that I used.
Well,
But
maybe there's more than one clue.
Yes.
yeah, I guess there is more than one clue in this case. So in 1989, um, I contracted with West Cliff Publishers to produce this book. At the time, they were the largest publisher in terms of volume of landscape photography books in the US. Number two was the Sierra Club, based right here in San Francisco. I don't even know if the Sierra Club produces books anymore, but they did for a long time. I have several of their other
Me
books.
too.
California has the most diverse geology of any of the states, and a subset of geology is geomorphology, which is a study of the actual surface of the earth, which is shaped by erosion, and wind, and rain, and earthquakes, etc. And this book on the surface is a coffee table book, but inside I've compacted the 11 geomorphological provinces of California into 7 different chapters, and I talk about the geology of each of those provinces briefly in the text.
I guess
No
I'm going to have to buy
book,
that book.
no book about California landscape could be published without the beautiful sand dunes in Death Valley. This is a complex sand dune. Dunes are named after the shape of the wind that creates them. Uh, in this case, the wind direction changed rather frequently, creating this complex shape. These are parallel sand dunes. The wind direction was from the lower left corner up to the top right. And here you can see the base of the desert floor and the beginning of the sand dune, which goes up, 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 and reaches a peak and drops off precipitously again to the base of the desert floor. And then the next sand dune starts up in this direction.
Wow.
Another complex sand dune.
What's a brachial sand dune?
I'm sorry?
Isn't there a name for sand dunes called brachial when they're
I
on
think you're thinking
Oh,
of Barchan Dune.
Barkin. Yeah, Barkin.
what's that?
Barchan.
Right.
Yeah, I photographed Barkins.
They're crescent shaped,
Yeah, they're
isolated
crescent shaped.
on flat desert hard pan.
Yeah, I don't remember whether that was in California or not, but they are crescent shaped, semi crescent shaped, not completely. They're kind of flat, at the U part with longer arms that stretch out that distinguish them from the crescent sand dunes. One of the things you can do with photography, as you know, is create optical illusions. So when I'm flying around, I look out for optical illusions. I don't find them very often, but in this case, I found one. Um, some of you may see these squiggly white and black lines as mounds raised above the brown surface of the desert floor, but others of you might see them as depressions down into the brown surface of the desert floor. So that's one optical illusion. In this case, it's more like a double optical illusion because if I flip this photograph upside down, and you can do that if you're an aerial photographer, because when you're looking down at something, there's no true up and down, there's no true left and right. But if I flip this upside down, some of you may flip your visualization of those mounds and see these as the opposite of what you saw before.
It's because
That,
our in our eyes we're used to seeing light come from above. And so things that are raised will have light on the upper portion of the raised object, whatever it is. And if you have it lit from below, it will look totally different, or you flip it upside down. But we expect light to come from the upper portion of a photograph. In this case,
thank,
we expect it to be from the upper right.
yeah,
And
thank
so
you.
that would be
That's
erased.
exactly the case here. The light is coming from the lower left corner, going to the upper right corner. And
Yeah,
that's how this illusion is created, along with the shadows that help.
it's really fun.
Zabriskie Point in the central of the eastern mountains that create Death Valley. These are 1,000-year-old North American indigenous intaglios surrounded by a fence to try to prevent any further destruction from off-road vehicles. I learned about them through an article in National Geographic one year, and the only information that National Geographic gave was that they were near the town of Blythe, which is in the southeast corner of the state. They didn't give any other hint about where they were. I guess they were trying to keep it a secret. But I flew down there and flew around quite a bit of time trying to find it. I started to run out of gas. I landed at the local airport very frustrated, but I struck up a conversation with another pilot who just happened to be there filling up his airplane and told him what I was trying to do. He said, "Oh, follow me." And so he took off. I followed him. In about a half an hour, he led me over here.
Oh my.
Now, um, eons of weathering and baking by the sun will turn the desert floor into a darker color. But if you scrape away the very top surface of that darker color, even just a few inches, you get to this lighter color. That's how people created these intaglios, because the depth of those scrapings is only about 4 or 5 inches. How they could create them is anyone's guess because they can't be seen from the air. There are no hills anywhere in the neighborhood of these intaglios. On the way back to the Blythe Airport, I found several other uncharted patches of these intaglios, of different intaglios, actually.
Wow.
This was the most dramatic of the group that I found. These black splotches in the ocean are called marine stacks. They are an indication of where the shoreline used to be. A marine stack is just a hard piece of rock, harder than what the shoreline used to be made of. And through eons of weathering by the crashing of the waves, the erosion takes place, forcing the coastline farther eastward. This is in the coastline of Jenner. Was there a question there?
No, I think somebody was just talking with their
Okay,
microphone on.
okay. This is Saddlebag Lake, a frozen lake in the Sierras. The marbled blue areas, the ice, the speckled highlights are again waves that are kicked up by a strong wind and reflecting the sun. The dark black is where there are no waves, and you're looking through the surface of the water down to the floor of the lake.
Where is this lake?
Saddlebag, it's generally central Sierra Mountains.
Thank you.
Saddlebag's on the eastern side of the Yosemite.
Thank you.
This is Buckeye Pass area of the Sierras, hazy day.
Jeez.
Although looking through, I don't know, maybe 50 miles of distance, but still hazy.
Very young mountains.
Effervescent green slopes of Mount Diablo, as you know, last for 4 or 5 weeks in the spring before it turns that dull green and then eventually turns that still beautiful brown.
Though your trees have turned very brown with the sunset lighting.
Yeah. Shoreline of Pescadero, reflecting the setting sun, the pink of the setting sun, but also reflecting the shape of the waves that create them. The waves eat away at the base of the cliffs, and eventually the top, middle, and top of the cliffs collapse onto the sand, and then the waves wash away that residue.
Striking.
Point Reyes,
Am I wrong in thinking a lot of that this is Kodachrome? A lot of these are Kodachrome.
yeah, I shot color exclusively with Kodachrome, and that is not, when Kodachrome is mishandled, it turns kind of pinkish,
Like
and
that.
and and it looks exactly like this. In fact, on several of my Death Valley trips, I didn't properly handle the Kodachrome, and I got some pretty poor results when I got back. But this is actually the pink from created by the setting sun, and that Kodachrome pink looks exactly like this.
I know.
Good
Is that
spotting.
Kodachrome 2?
Yeah.
Was that Kodachrome 2?
No, just the original Kodachrome. In 2015, I was hired by the Alameda County Arts Commission, along with about a dozen or a couple dozen other artists, to produce artwork for a new wing at Highland Hospital in Oakland. I was one of two photographers. The other photographer spent his time on the ground photographing the local flora. I had two goals in this project. One was to try to stay within the confines of Alameda County, and it wasn't very easy at the time because not only are county lines, but city lines aren't even drawn on the aviation maps. It would be a lot easier today because um, because there's a new technology. It's like a three-dimensional GPS, and you can see exactly where you are at any time. And so it's easier to be very, very specific about your location when you're kind of far away from any airport. Uh, but at the time, I had to try to transcribe those county lines on from a AAA map onto my printed aviation maps. My
Let-
secondary goal was to try to photograph the natural landscape unencumbered by too much human activity. And in these photographs, you won't see a great deal of human activity.
Let me guess, this is a Fujichrome transparency.
No, no, again, it's Kodachrome.
Yeah.
That's those are, the whole Bay Area. These are the hills near Lake Del Valle in the Livermore Valley. And
Mm-hmm.
that whole area turns that same iridescent green. It's just drop dead gorgeous, just for a very short period of time before it kind of gets slightly more dull green.
Wow.
This is another meandering river in a mud flat near the eastern anchorage of the San Mateo Bridge, reflecting the sunlight.
So like satin.
This is the Berkeley shoreline and
Wow.
the mud flats with the waves gently lapping along the mud flats. This is the area that you see right here when you're driving along Highway 80 just before you turn off to San Francisco, where you used to be able to see a Snoopy sitting on top of his doghouse, posted
Aha.
on a wooden post, if you remember that.
So near the old Trader Vic's.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Altamont, wind
Oh, wow.
turbines.
What lighting. Oh, that's amazing. Makes it look like a cemetery.
Yeah, it does. Well, uh, you go over Altamont at just about any time, and three-quarters of the turbines are still. They're not moving at all. And you know that the wind is blowing because the one right next to it is twirling around at high speed. So it might as well be a cemetery for some of these turbines.
Hmm.
And hills north of Livermore, very close to Livermore Airport. For those pilots, I had to maintain contact with Livermore Tower in order to fly in this area.
Uh-huh.
Now, these sheep uh, are in an area of the Oakland Hills that's in fact just underneath the flight path of all the large commercial passenger traffic that comes in to land at the big runway at
Mm-hmm.
an airport. Now, although I'm about 2,000 feet above the sheep, and those commercial aircraft are 3,000 feet above me, they're about 5,000. um, I had to maintain contact with Oakland Tower because when a large, heavy aircraft flies very slow, they create very strong wingtip vortices. And they're so strong, they could literally flip my little airplane upside down. So whenever a commercial aircraft was approaching this area, I'd have to scoot off to the side for 5 minutes and wait for the wingtip vortices to dissipate before I could come back to this area.
We had a similar situation flying out of Lagoon Valley because the C-5s were flying over us.
Right, right.
And talk about wake turbulence. Boy.
Okay, let me just ask you a question. I've been waiting to ask this. Um, get into the subject of drone photography versus aerial
Good.
photography. I mean, one thing, you couldn't fly that close to an airport. So drones are, you can't get within 8 miles, I think it is. I
It's
mean,
5 miles
5 miles.
and 3,000 feet. Uh, Drones are also restricted to 400 feet altitude. Um, Whenever drones get close to an airport, and close is not defined as far as I know, um, they have to coordinate with the controlling facility.
Well, drones can stitch. I have a drone and started to use one on a workshop with a top landscape photographer, probably the preeminent landscape photographer. And he was saying, this is a guy named Mark Adamus, and he was saying that he now takes 60% of his landscape photographs with drones. And this is using the drone sometimes for wide angle work. He would stitch. You can do panos, you can bracket, all that stuff. It's an amazingly helpful and useful tool for landscape photography. I'm just in love with the thing.
Yeah, the technology of the drones, technology of the optics that they're using the cameras, it's improving at a exponential rate, and they're so much more capable and versatile than they were just a few years ago. They're a great platform. I have nothing against them. I just don't want to have a collision with them when I'm taking off. I've seen drone operators go up to 10,000 feet, which is blatantly
Wow.
illegal and extremely dangerous.
I did that actually in it. You can get permission. You can hack it. I mean, you have to write to DJI, which makes the drone. And we got permission when I was in Chile to fly at 6,000 feet. I, in a 45-minute flight, I could get up to 6,000 feet, 8 clicks away from a boat in the fjord, and took some pictures that did very well in two camera club competitions of this mountain that's rarely seen on a wonderful day. And it was one of the more thrilling photographic experiences I've had in decades. It was just absolutely fantastic experience. Flying right through a cloud, 6 minutes going straight up to emerge and see this scene that I just will never forget. And then a lot of drama getting it back to the boat. But
Well, I have no doubt that it was a wonderful image and a great experience for you. But DJI is not the controlling facility in the US, it's the FAA, and I doubt very much whether you'd get authority from the FAA to get above 400 feet unless it was a special occasion.
I'm sure you're right. This was in Chile.
Yeah.
Curiously, the Trump administration just banned DJI from selling its drones in the United States. So they're
Oh
new.
my goodness. Oh,
Yeah,
that's horrible.
yeah.
DJI has been banned from military and intelligence use for at least 2 or 3 years. So government and military are not allowed to use DJI for their purposes. Um, I, uh, but they're still used. They're the predominant, as I'm sure you know, drone manufacturer in that's supplied by China, and it's a great platform. And I think the majority of uh, amateur and serious photographers use DJI.
Wow.
Moving on. This is the Pleasanton Ridge Regional Park.
Stunning.
Beautiful.
Hills near San Antonio Reservoir in the Livermore Valley. You can see a plot of vineyards here. These are waves in the South Berkeley Saline Basin with trees along the basin casting shadows and a small little sailboat here. Salt evaporation ponds in the Newark Slough.
Wow.
More salt evaporation ponds in the Don Edwards National Wildlife Refuge.
Uh-huh.
Tidelands near Coyote Point, which is near the eastern anchorage of the San Mateo Bridge. When I fly around something, I mention I fly in circles around it because the lighting can change dramatically and create totally new subject matter. So here's the same tidelands from the opposite direction.
The angle of the light.
This is more dendritic flow along the Coyote Hills marshland. It's that shape that water flows along on a gentle slope, a tree-like pattern. And these are the hills near Ohlone Regional Wilderness Area.
You seem to take most of your images late or early in the day, so you don't get the harsh midday light, and you get beautiful shadows and modeling of the landscape. Is that
That's
intentional?
that's fairly accurate, although I uh, also often go up in the middle of the day looking for that flat landscape, that flat perception or perspective. And some of the photographs you saw here were taken directly in the middle of the day. If you recall those tractors, opposing tractors on that
Uh-huh. Yeah.
field near Livermore, it was shot right in the middle of the day. So I often go up in the middle of the day. But when I want to create that real strong three-dimensional feeling, you can only get that at sunrise or sunset.
Thank
Barry,
you.
what are you
The
flying
coloration.
now?
I'm sorry, yes.
What are you flying now?
Now, I used to own a 182
Right.
with
My husband.
the attendees here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we
yeah, There's my old aircraft partner, Howard Brand. Um, but
Wait a minute, we're not seeing him. We're just seeing your name.
Me?
well, I see him there.
Please go back to full screen.
Yeah.
So, anyway, now I fly a 150 or 152. I rent from a small club out of Oakland Airport. I stick around the Bay Area for the most part. I don't travel around the state or around the country like I used to. So I don't really have need of a larger aircraft. The 150, the 152, it's really an excellent platform for aerial photography. Uh, it's a good learning aircraft as well because you can do anything to it. It's very, very forgiving. You can do real steep banks. You can dive. You can climb. Really, it's very forgiving. So it's perfect for my purposes. I'm open to more questions.
Okay.
Contact me through my website. Um, I'm glad to answer any questions you may have now or later. I want to thank you all again for attending and Lorinda for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. Absolutely wonderful, Barry. You know, inspirational. The both the technical quality and the artistic quality are just mind-blowing. It's
You're good.
quite wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, very terrific images. Thanks so much for sharing, Barry. It's very impressive and like Linda said, it's very inspiring and also reminds us that we should be stewards of the earth as well. So thanks so much.
Precisely.
So
A
why don't we
wonderful street. Thank you.
stop the screen share, Barry, and so we can go back to see each other's faces?
Okay.
Unless you want to share, unless you want to talk about particular images and go back to them.
Well, does anyone want to talk about particular images? All right, with this.
I have an observation on an earlier image of the top of the Golden Gate Bridge pylon with the clouds covering most of the rest of it. Looked like there might have been a glory type rainbow right around the towers, a faint, very faint one in your image.
Yeah, the one that shows mostly white clouds and just
Yes.
top of the bridge. Yeah, there was a rainbow glory surrounding that. If you tell me how to get get out a screen share,
Oh, no. If you want to show that image, you stay in screen share.
I would be glad to. I just have to march back through the
Right.
slideshow to try and find it.
Okay.
Let me see if I can.
The top of the Zoom screen, the meeting array of participants can also be seen, and next to that, to the right, is your screen share. So we can keep your screen share, but also see everybody, depending on what people would
Oh, I
like to
see.
do.
In red, it says stop share.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. All right. All right. So, I've done a few Zooms, but I feel like an amateur sometimes.
That worked out very well.
Barry, you might have
You're obviously a great pilot and a great photographer, so.
Barry, you might have answered this before, but I wanted to know about the shutter speeds. You must be using a fast shutter speed and fast film to get sharp images with all of that jiggling going on.
Um, yes and no. I maximize the shutter speed. I set the aperture to the widest aperture that all my unsharp lenses will handle. Lenses are not really designed to be sharp at infinity. And when you get to anything near 1,000 feet or more, you're at infinity. Lenses, when you put them at the infinity mark on the barrel, if you ever did a lens test, you would be very disappointed, which I am with most of the lenses that I have. So when I shoot aerials, I have to stop down at least one, if not two stops from wide open. And I take whatever shutter speed that allows me to use. I've developed a technique over the decades that allows me to shoot at relatively slow speeds, even at as slow as an eighth of a second in the air, and still get very sharp results, sharp enough to make 30 by 40 prints or so images. But it's just a technique that took me a while to develop. One of these days, I'll maybe hopefully find some sharper lenses and switch them out.
Can you talk about what you do to make that happen?
Talk about what? I'm sorry.
Getting it focused like that with that kind of a slow shutter speed.
How do I do that?
Yeah.
There are two primary ways. Any sports photographer doesn't hold their camera in one position as someone's running across the field. They pan with the subject. Also, I couch the camera in my arms like this. I don't hold it up directly against my head. I don't make contact with the airplane itself. And I try to relax my shoulders and my arms. So I'm absorbing as much of the vibration from the airplane as possible. So those are the two primary techniques that I use.
Thank you.
Sure. More questions?
Well,
How windy is it when you open the window in the cockpit?
100 mile an hour.
Well, the 152 that I usually fly, its max speed is about 110. I usually fly anywhere between 80 and 100 for various reasons. If I fly much faster or much slower, the vibrations actually increase. So I've discovered that somewhere in the 80 to 100 miles per hour range minimizes the vibrations from the airplane. So they don't maximize that. When they design airplanes, they don't really care how much they vibrate. They just care how they perform otherwise. So vibration is not really a factor.
Just a suggestion that I haven't done myself, so take it with a grain of salt. Some camera bodies will allow you to calibrate the distance settings on your lenses. And so you may be able to take your best lenses, I would suggest doing it on your best lenses, and calibrate infinity. And I don't know what you're shooting with, but you can read up on it and see whether your body will allow you to do that.
I appreciate the suggestion. You all remember Nikon used to have an office in downtown San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
Was that 2nd Street, I think, towards the bridge? They had a full-blown repair facility there.
Yeah, you can rent that too.
An optical collimator there. I got to be pretty friendly with the repair people, unfortunately. And they would let me bring in lenses that I was considering purchasing. And I would put them on their collimator, and we would project out onto a screen an Air Force test target onto a screen 10 or 15 feet away. It was just disappointing how soft these lenses are at infinity or anywhere close to it. What's even worse is that you wouldn't get the whole field of view soft. You get circular rings of softness. So you'd have these concentric rings of softness and sharpness and softness. It was just really depressing. And so the only thing that allowed me to do was to test the lens at different f-stops. And there wasn't one lens that Nikon made in any focal length that was sharp wide open. I always had to stop down at least one, if not two stops to get something that was presentable. Now, granted, my lenses are pretty old, and I know there's a lot of new technology in 35 millimeter photography. In my opinion, the majority of that technology is going to features on the camera. A lot of it's going to video. And when someone brings out a new version or upgrades their firmware, it has more to do with the video, and occasionally it has to do with the still part of the camera. But the technology in lenses is usually trying to cram more zoom into a shorter space and into a lighter space rather than making the zooms or any of their lenses actually sharper. That's my general overall opinion. I know there are exceptions to that rule, but I don't think too many people care that much about sharpness at infinity. I think that's why the manufacturers don't put much emphasis on it. That's just my 2 bits. More questions. It's getting better as we move along. You're asking better questions than I usually get, I guess, because you're a bunch of photographers. That was a compliment, not a criticism.
Have you ever dropped a camera? You'll have to ask.
Oh my goodness. No. Never. First of all, I've never even dropped a camera inside the cockpit. First of all, when I open the window of the airplane, I keep the front of the lens inside the frame of the window, because if the front of the lens starts to penetrate that frame, it's going to pick up all that 80, 100-mile-an-hour wind, and I'll never get a sharp shot. So I have to lean back away from the window to make sure, even with a long telephoto lens, that it's not sticking out into the window. And so, no, and I used to use a hand strap that attaches to the camera. I don't use that anymore because with this new navigational GPS, 3-dimensional GPS, I'm sure the pilots in the group know about it. ADS-B, you need to monkey around a little bit occasionally with your iPad or your navigational system display on the airplane, and I can't tie up one hand holding the camera if I'm trying to maneuver the airplane and punch in a code on my navigational device. So now I just use a neck strap like everyone else. so that the camera isn't going anywhere. I'm very careful, however, about switching lenses. Whenever I want to switch lenses, I bring the camera in, put it down on my lap. So if I somehow lose track of that lens, it's down on my lap. And then I switch lenses or filters or whatever, camera bodies, whatever the case may be. There's no way that the body or the lens is going to go out the window.
Barry, a lot of your images look like they're looking straight down on the landscape. And I'm just wondering, I know you said you're circling, how much do you bank? Or do you bank? You know, because you say you have the lens not outside of the window to keep it out of the wind. So it's even with the window. But if you're doing that, you've got to tilt it to
Gonna
get
do a steep
looking
turn.
down.
Right.
What is your banking on that?
Well, that's a very accurate observation. If I'm flying straight and level and I can't stick the camera out in the wind, I can only see a very small section of the landscape, just a few degrees. I also mentioned that I fly circles around. So when you're flying circles around, you do bank. And I would say I do the majority of my photography looking at the Earth at roughly around a 45-degree angle. It's not necessary to go into a 45-degree bank in order to get a 45-degree angle, because there is some space below the window. I mean, the window is, what I mean by that is the window is a little bit below my shoulder length. So I can sit up and point the camera down and still get that 45 degree. If I don't quite get what I want, then I go into a steeper bank. I can do 60-degree banks pretty easily now.
Okay.
I don't tell my flight instructors that I do 60-degree banks because I think the max, I don't remember, 150 might just be 60 degrees. And sometimes I push those limits too. But I've been flying in circles.
That sounds kind of funny. Thanks, Barry.
So for me, a 60-degree bank is no big deal. What happens with the 60-degree bank is that when you come around the other end, you hit your own wake turbulence.
Oh, yeah, right.
And that's always jarring, but I'm usually ready for that. But I guess the answer to your question is I bank the airplane as to whatever degree is necessary. And some of my images are shot looking straight down. When you bank an airplane 60-degree bank or more, it's not easy to keep it from descending. They want to go down, and if you try and yank them back up, you're in a classic stall situation, and you're going to get yourself in trouble. In fact, that's how some novice aerial photographers find themselves in trouble. They they do a bank and pull out too sharply and stall the airplane, and they're 1,000 feet above the ground. They don't have enough altitude to recover. But if I want to do something like that, I gain enough altitude so that if the airplane does start to descend, I'm in control of that. And I keep my right eye focused over on the altimeter to make sure I'm at a safe altitude. Again, it's that muscle memory that I've developed over the decades of flying and photographing simultaneously. All these little tricks. I don't even think about what I'm doing now. I just do them. I guess it's the same thing if you're a commercial pilot flying whatever cargo or passenger airplane, and you're on the same route for many years, landing and taking off from the same airport, you probably have to really discipline yourself to stay focused on what you're doing.
When you're taking those pictures, don't you have to have one hand on the steering wheel?
No, airplanes are generally pretty stable, and in the tiny little Volkswagen size airplanes I fly, there's no such thing as autopilot. But it's kind of like when you're driving down Highway 5 in your car and it's 10 miles of straight road. If you took your hands off the steering wheel, your car would kind of go straight for a while, and then maybe after 10 or 15 seconds, it would start to veer off to one side. It's the same thing with most airplanes. There are trim tabs you can maintain the altitude of the aircraft if nothing else changes. But if the airplane starts to veer off to the right or to the left or goes up or down a little bit, it doesn't mean anything. It's not crucial for a short period of time if you lose 100 feet or you start to turn to the right or left or whatever.
It
I'm just
matters if you're
aware,
close to the ground, of course, but you're not.
again, I stay at a legal safe altitude, so
Yep.
I don't worry about that. But I also pay attention to the airplane. I can tell whether the airplane is descending or ascending just by the sound it makes. I don't even have to look outside, or I don't even have to look at the altimeter. I know my little airplane well enough so that the different sounds it makes when it's doing different maneuvers, I'm aware of. But at the same time, I'm not taking my eyes off of uh, the flight instruments for very long periods of time.
Can I ask what age you began flying?
I think I was 18,
Wow.
and I lived in Southern California in a little town called Lakewood, right next to Long Beach Airport. And one summer in college, I got a job gassing airplanes at Long Beach Airport. In fact, what was interesting was, and then the place that I worked at was called All Air Oasis. I don't think it's there anymore. And they offered lessons to their employees at a discount. I started taking lessons there. But Long Beach Airport is right adjacent to McDonnell Douglas. And it's also right down the road from Alamitos Naval Air Station, where they built the capsules for the various astronauts. And they would truck those capsules over to Long Beach Airport. And there used to be a converted aircraft called a Super Guppy. It was a DC-8 or something like that. And it looked like a regular shaped fuselage, except right in the middle was this big, gigantic hump about as tall, twice the height of the fuselage itself. And that's where they'd stick the astronauts' capsules. And I used to gas up the Super Guppy. And one day that there's no one around, door was open. So I I climbed into the to the body of the aircraft and walked around the capsule that was sitting there unprotected. I don't know. Uh, you couldn't you couldn't get within a mile of a capsule nowadays, but it was just sitting there, and I was kind of fascinated with it. But I had all sorts of interesting experiences there in Long Beach and got my license. Great instructor, great uh, examiner who gave me my test for my pilot's license. Really good experiences. There used to be a little airport between. I don't know if you're interested in this, so if I'm rambling on, just shut me off. Tell me to stop. But there used to be a little airport halfway between Long Beach and Orange County, and it was called Metal Art. It's a dirt strip. No, it's a beat up old asphalt strip, too narrow. It made kind of a slight right turn in the middle of the runway, right where there was a little dip in the runway. And my instructor was really my flight instructor figured if I could land at Metal Art at night with no lights, then I was okay for my with my pilot's license. So
Wow.
that's where he, that's where he took me for my test. I thought when he said no lights, they would just turn off the lights on the runway. Well, turn off the lights on the runway and my landing light. Usually you use your landing light at night to help gauge with the runway lights to help gauge your distance above the runway. But if you don't have either of those, it's a little bit more difficult.
Bit nerve-wracking. You'd probably make a good drug runner.
Yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure they trained at Middle because it's not too far from the Mexican border.
Oh,
More questions?
no, I guess that's it, folks.
All right.
Well, thank you
you
so
again.
much, Barry. This was very inspirational. I really
Thank you very much
love
for
your work
your
and
questions and attendance.
love hearing about anything to do with flying, of course.
All
And
right. All right. I guess I'll sign off.
okay, we really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you, Lorinda, for bringing them on.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'll
Try
be
to mix it
looking
up.
for
And
your book.
anybody that has any particular